Well, in case you had any doubts left about who George Kliavkoff is and what his role was in the destruction of the Pac-12, he's making sure to leave no doubt. Welcome into the channel. I am John Kurtz. Here on this channel, we talk conference realignment, college football, college basketball, all from a Big 12 angle. Please consider subscribing if you have not. Live shows Wednesdays and Sundays, they are a blast and very lively, so make sure that you are here for those. If you could like the video, leave a comment under the video. I would appreciate that, whether you agree, disagree, love me, hate me, all of that is perfect. And if you are so inclined, you can support the channel on Venmo at John-Kurtz-4. Man, national championship game is coming up tomorrow, right? And we had the college football playoff semifinals last week. And one thing that slipped under the cracks, or perhaps slipped through the cracks, we didn't talk about it on the last live show, was actually the fact that both Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark and Pac-12 Commissioner George Kliavkoff were in the Superdome for the Sugar Bowl to watch teams that were leaving their conferences in Texas and Washington. But George Kliavkoff actually spoke, and George Kliavkoff should probably stop speaking because I cannot believe what the guy continues to say when he opens his mouth. And he's not only being ripped by me, right? We're kind of the Big 12 angle here. You're getting a Big 12-centric viewpoint. John Wilner, Pac-12 Hotline, covers the Pac-12 better than anybody. He was on top of everything throughout the Big 12, Pac-12 saga that went on over the last year and a half. Even he is absolutely ripping George Kliavkoff after his comments. So let's get into it. Here's what John Wilner had to say. He says in his first public comments in months, Pac-12 Commissioner George Kliavkoff did not express sorrow over the downfall of the conference or accept responsibility for his role in the collapse of a century-old college sports institution. That's a lead, my friends. That is one hell of a lead from John Wilner there. It says instead, Kliavkoff appeared to take credit for the Pac-12's successful football season and blame the schools for the failed media rights negotiations. Who does Kliavkoff think he is? Larry Scott? Doesn't get much more scathing than that in Pac-12 country. And Pac-12 fans, I know you know what I'm talking about because he's a guy that bears a ton of responsibility for the failure of this conference as well. Wilner says, approached by reporters in the Superdome on Monday night following Washington's playoff victory over Texas, Kliavkoff offered several brief comments. He told Yahoo, quote, "Happy for the kids. They don't deserve all the nonsense going on around them. We were focused on rebuilding football. It took 2.5 years. I wish it would have happened quicker. If some of our schools would have been a little more patient, it would have paid off." I mean, that guy, the balls on that guy to say that after this entire saga. I mean, there are countless videos here on this channel where you can go back through and relive everything that happened, but all of the failed promises, all of the failed timelines, the way that Kliavkoff hung leadership in the conference, be it athletic directors or presidents, out to dry by giving them promised timelines that wouldn't come through. And then ultimately in the end, giving them a deal that was not matching up at all to what he had promised. All of these failed things. And yet he is the one to say here, he has the guts to say at the end of this, you guys should have been more patient. Patience was running out. Patience had run out for any sane person. Obviously, it ran out for Colorado, and they started the exodus there. But that is an unbelievable, just such a salty comment from this guy. Accept some responsibility. We've never at any point seen him accept any level of responsibility in all of this. It is unbelievable. I mean, and this just speaks to what was going on behind the scenes. You know, I'm not saying that us in Big 12 country that were looking at this had necessarily everything right, like every take was pretty correct, but the general consistency of it is that, yeah, we were, because this guy was a doofus. This is not a leader. That is not the way that a leader handles something like this. That is one thing that is abundantly clear about George Kliavkoff. And a statement like that after the fact is just, if I were an Oregon State or a Washington State fan, for instance, I mean, I'd just be wanting to punch my computer screen reading that. It's terrible. I agree with the first part of it. The kids don't deserve all the nonsense going on around them. And some of that is just the college football world that we live in right now. Now the TV networks are directing everything and controlling everything. But to act like you played no role in this and that it was the schools not being patient enough that was the downfall of it. I mean, I'm sorry. It's hard not to curse, dude, because I do feel for Oregon State and Washington State and everything that happened there. And I want to just be like, you're the guy making potentially $8 million to go away for this failure, and you're going to sit here and blame it on the schools. Unbelievable stuff from George Kliavkoff. Seconds later, in a subsequent interview, Kliavkoff told 24/7 Sports, surreal. It's surreal. It's upsetting that some of our schools weren't more patient because if they saw what we were building, it would have paid off. I mean, just the same thing. So he's doubling down. I mean, the emphasis there is, that's basically the same quote, and he's doubling down. Had multiple chances to offer some level of contrition or just self-awareness of his role in all this. No, none of that. None of that. George Kliavkoff doesn't want any of that. This guy is who he thought he was. He absolutely is. Not a leader. So Wilner goes on to just undress him here. First, let's hit the easy target. Blaming the schools for not being more patient epitomizes the complete disconnect between Kliavkoff and his campuses that ultimately doomed the negotiations and fractured the conference. University presidents and athletic directors aren't built to wait 13 months for a media rights deal, especially when the process is delayed repeatedly and the final offer isn't what they anticipated. In an alternate universe, sure, the Pac-12 could have bet on itself in the fall of 2023 and signed a lucrative deal this winter. But in the real world, with risk-averse presidents and athletic directors facing daily pressures on the front lines, the strategy was all wrong. Kliavkoff didn't have the requisite urgency last winter and apparently hasn't learned from the mistake. Before we plunge into the legitimacy of his view on the football rebuilding process, understand the circumstances under which Kliavkoff offered his comments. It was not a formal session with the media. It was impromptu and brief, and not the place for Kliavkoff to provide a detailed assessment of any topic. Could Kliavkoff have declined to comment? Sure. But he's an affable guy who probably didn't want to snub familiar reporters. Also, Kliavkoff absolutely believes what he said. The hotline has engaged in enough conversations over the years with Kliavkoff and various Pac-12 officials to be fairly certain that he's convinced of his own role in the conference's on-field success and wants credit for it. All right, so this is more for this to me is the less interesting part of it, him trying to take credit for football. I mean, like, that's fine. Honestly, I'm not as upset about that because, look, maybe he did play a decent role in that, and that's cool. But again, wrong place, wrong time to really be seeking out a lot of that. Like, you imploded the conference by a failure of leadership. So I offer that up to show you that even John Wilner is like, yeah, look, that's an asinine comment for him to not take any responsibility for that and put the blame on the schools. I appreciate the context that he's showing there. Like, hey, this wasn't like a press conference where he would be theoretically prepared with an answer. It was a little more impromptu. But I would also counter that and say, dude, you went to the game. You know that every single major reporter is going to be there. You're going to have to, you will likely be asked questions about it. Now, if he wanted to no comment it, fine. I would actually respect that a lot more. But what he did, he just couldn't resist the opportunity to try to place the blame on somebody else. As far as the on-field success, I mean, there's a lot here from John Wilner about what actually went into the on-field success in football for the Pac-12. He says 2 years ago this week, in fact, we reported the following. New Commissioner George Kliavkoff hopes to change the state of affairs by making the case to presidents and chancellors that investing in football can provide returns that benefit not only cash-strapped athletic departments, but entire campuses. Quote, historically, I don't think we've made a great case for the ROI of football. Kliavkoff told the hotline, we know where our bread is buttered. We're focused on the revenue sports and winning in football and men's basketball. Forget the subsequent ash and ruin. This conference is on the brink of a football championship, its first since USC in 2004, and the opportunity comes on Kliavkoff's watch. Does he deserve any credit? But here we go. Does he deserve any credit? This, again, John Wilner, Pac-12 guy that was, somewhat pushing Pac-12 friendly narratives, not nearly as much as John Canzano through all this. Says, does Kliavkoff deserve any credit? Not in our view. Why? Because Oregon and Washington were primarily responsible for the Pac-12 success this season, and neither situation fits neatly into Kliavkoff's narrative. The Ducks have been spending on football for years. Phil Knight, of all people, needs no convincing. Meanwhile, the Huskies didn't step far outside their standard resource range in order to reach the championship game. They hired Kalen DeBoer 2 years ago for $3.1 million a year, then gave him a whopping raise last season all the way to $4.2 million per year. 43 major college coaches were better compensated than DeBoer this season, and that doesn't include those at private schools. Sure, the Huskies will have to spend top dollar to keep DeBoer, but the path to 14-0 was hardly lined with gold. On the other hand, USC poured immense resources into the Lincoln Riley regime, but that decision had nothing to do with Kliavkoff's case for the ROI of football and everything to do with one of the sport's blue bloods paying market rate for an elite coach. Best we can tell, only one school reset its football spending and potentially did so in response to Kliavkoff's case for more football resources. That school, Colorado, finished last. Dude, this is great stuff from Wilner, man. I mean, I have always told you guys I respected him a lot throughout the process, even if I wasn't always agreeing with what he said. This is great work. He's typically a reporter. This is kind of like combo reporter / column here, but combining facts to back up his opinion. Just slamming the guy. George Kliavkoff is a fraud, man. I'm sorry. And yes, is it a little self-serving and like, hey, we were right about this guy the whole time? Yes, but I also, again, I feel terribly for everybody that's affected by his horrendous leadership in the Pac-12 in this entire saga and everything that happened. So Look, is he responsible for all of it? No, like Larry Scott, the seeds have been planted for years, but I just can't respect a guy that will not own up to at all his role in everything that happened and wants to push the blame on everybody else. So anyway, wild stuff. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Live shows Wednesdays and Sundays. We will probably talk about this coming up on the live show tonight. And I'm sure it will get very, very interesting there. So make sure you're subscribed, click the alert button, leave a comment. What do you think of George Kliavkoff? Am I wrong? You buy in the leadership of this guy? Should the blame be directed on the schools? Let me know in the comments. Like the video, I would much appreciate that. And again, you can contribute to the channel on Venmo at John-Kurtz-4. Appreciate all of you guys. Take care, and I will talk to you soon.